My daughter-in-law sent me a gift by mistake. What was inside shocked me. Sometimes the packages that arrive at our doorstep contain more than just merchandise. They contain revelations that can shatter everything we thought we knew about our family. The UPS truck pulled away from my circular driveway just as I was stepping out of my silver Mercedes, still wearing my tennis whites from the country club. The afternoon Georgia sun beat down mercilessly, but the shade from our century-old oak trees provided blessed relief as I walked toward the front steps of our colonial mansion. What I found waiting for me would turn my perfect world upside down in ways I never could have imagined. A medium-sized Amazon box sat innocuously by our mahogany front door, addressed to Mrs. Eleanor Washington. That was me. Though most people in our affluent Buckhead neighborhood knew me as Ellie, the woman who'd built a multi-million-dollar catering empire from scratch after my husband Jerome passed 5 years ago. I almost didn't open it that day. Tuesday afternoons were reserved for my weekly massage appointment with Svetlana, and I was already running late. But something about the package nagged at me. I hadn't ordered anything recently. My personal shopper Marcus usually handled all my online purchases and had them delivered directly to my walk-in closet. Little did I know that this moment of curiosity would expose a web of deception that had been spinning right under my nose. Inside our marble foyer, I set down my Hermes tennis bag and examined the box more closely. The return address showed it was from somewhere in California, but there was no company name. Just a residential address I didn't recognize. The shipping label indicated it had been sent via 2-day delivery. Someone had paid extra to get this to me quickly. My manicured nails, painted in my signature shade of deep burgundy, made quick work of the packing tape. Inside, nestled between layers of bubble wrap, was something that made me freeze in place. A pregnancy test. Used. And undeniably positive. But that wasn't the shocking part. Not yet. What came next would make me question everything I thought I knew about my son's marriage. Attached to the test with a rubber band was a handwritten note on expensive cream-colored stationery that I immediately recognized. It was the same paper my daughter-in-law Jasmine used for her thank you notes. The ones she'd insisted on writing after our elaborate wedding reception 3 years ago at the Atlanta History Center. The note was brief, written in Jasmine's distinctive cursive. Marcus, baby, I can't wait to tell you in person. Our little secret is going to change everything. I'll be at the usual place tonight at 8. Love always, Jay. My hands began to tremble as the implications crashed over me like a tidal wave. Marcus wasn't my personal shopper's name. It was my son's middle name. My son, Michael Marcus Washington Jr., who everyone in the family called by his middle name to distinguish him from his late grandfather. And the usual place could only mean one location, the penthouse suite at the Ritz-Carlton downtown, the one I'd been paying for monthly as a business expense for my catering company's VIP clients. My daughter-in-law was having an affair with someone named Marcus, using my money to finance their rendezvous. I sank onto our antique velvet settee, my mind reeling. This package had clearly been meant for someone else. Some other Marcus who was anxiously awaiting news of his impending fatherhood. But Amazon's algorithm had delivered it to the wrong address, and now I was holding evidence of my daughter-in-law's infidelity in my trembling hands. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, Eleanor Washington, a woman who'd built her reputation on bringing families together around perfectly prepared meals, discovering that my own family was falling apart because of secrets and lies. But as I sat there in my $2 million home, surrounded by all the trappings of success I'd worked so hard to achieve, I realized that this moment of accidental discovery might actually be a blessing in disguise. Because what I was about to uncover would prove that sometimes the most devastating mistakes can lead to the most necessary truths. My phone buzzed with a text from my son Michael. Mom, Jasmine's working late again tonight. Rain check on dinner? Working late? Right. I looked at the pregnancy test again, then at the note. The handwriting was definitely Jasmine's. I'd seen it on enough birthday cards and holiday greetings to know. But the tone was wrong. Too familiar. Too intimate. This wasn't how a woman wrote to a casual acquaintance. Standing up, I walked to my home office, my heels clicking authoritatively on the hardwood floors. If Jasmine thought she could play games with my family, she was about to learn that Eleanor Washington didn't get to where she was by being naive or passive. I'd built Washington Catering from nothing after Jerome died, turning my grief into determination and my kitchen skills into $1 million enterprise. I'd navigated the predominantly white world of high-end Atlanta catering, earning respect and success through sheer force of will and exceptional service. And now those same skills that had built my empire were about to help me save my son from a marriage built on lies. The first thing I did was call the Ritz-Carlton. As a platinum member and frequent corporate client, I had direct access to the concierge. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Washington," came the familiar voice of Jonathan, who'd been handling my VIP requests for years. "How may I assist you today?" "Jonathan, I need to know about any reservations made for tonight under the name Jasmine Washington or Marcus." I paused, realizing I didn't know this Marcus's last name. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Washington, but I can't provide information about other guests' reservations for privacy reasons. However, I can tell you that your corporate suite is available tonight if you'd like to make a reservation." My corporate suite, the one I'd been paying for monthly. "Actually, Jonathan, let me ask this differently. Has anyone been using my corporate suite regularly? I've been getting some unusual charges on my account." There was a pause. "Well, Mrs. Washington, I can confirm that your suite has been utilized quite frequently over the past several months, usually on Tuesday evenings. The reservations have been made under your corporate account, so we assumed they were authorized." Tuesday evenings. Tonight was Tuesday. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and the picture they formed made my blood run cold. "Jonathan, I need you to do something for me. If anyone shows up tonight claiming to have a reservation for my suite, I want you to call me immediately. Don't let them in, and don't mention this conversation to anyone." "Of course, Mrs. Washington. Is everything all right?" "Everything's about to be," I said grimly. After ending the call, I sat back in my leather executive chair and considered my options. I could confront Jasmine directly, but that would give her a chance to craft lies or cover her tracks. I could tell Michael immediately, but he'd been so happy lately, happier than I'd seen him since his father died. Breaking his heart with unsubstantiated accusations wasn't something I wanted to do lightly. No, I needed more information first. I needed to know who this Marcus was, and exactly how deep this deception went. What I discovered over the next few hours would prove that the truth was far more complicated and far more shocking than I'd initially imagined. I started by doing what any successful businesswoman would do: research. Opening my laptop, I began investigating the return address on the package. A quick Google search revealed it belonged to a luxury apartment complex in Beverly Hills. Using my business connections, the network of suppliers, vendors, and clients I'd cultivated over the years, I was able to get more information. The apartment was registered to Marcus Chen, a 28-year-old investment banker who worked for Goldman Sachs in their Los Angeles office. A quick LinkedIn search showed he was originally from Atlanta, had graduated from Morehouse College, the same school my son had attended, and had moved to California 2 years ago. The same time Jasmine had started making frequent business trips to Los Angeles for her marketing job. But there was more. As I dug deeper into social media, cross-referencing dates and locations, a pattern emerged that made my stomach churn. Marcus Chen had been my son's roommate at Morehouse. They'd been best friends throughout college. In fact, Marcus had been the best man at Michael and Jasmine's wedding. The betrayal wasn't just coming from my daughter-in-law. It was coming from someone my son considered a brother. Photos on Instagram showed Marcus and Jasmine together at various events over the past year, always carefully positioned to look casual, friendly. But now, knowing what I knew, I could see the intimacy in their body language, the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. My hands shook as I scrolled through image after image. Here they were at a wine tasting in Napa Valley, the same weekend Jasmine had told Michael she was at a marketing conference. Here they were at a Dodgers game, her hand resting on his arm. Here they were at what looked like a romantic dinner, the lighting intimate, their faces close together. The most damning photo was from just 3 weeks ago. Jasmine and Marcus on a beach in Malibu, her head on his shoulder, both of them looking blissfully happy. The caption read, "Perfect day with my favorite person." While my son was home in Atlanta, working 60-hour weeks to build the life he thought he and his wife wanted, she was living a double life on the other side of the country. I closed the laptop and walked to the kitchen, needing to do something with my hands. Cooking had always been my therapy, my way of processing stress and finding clarity. Tonight, I'd need all the clarity I could get. As I pulled ingredients from my commercial-grade refrigerator, my mind wandered to all the warning signs I'd missed. Jasmine's frequent business trips, her distracted behavior during family dinners, the way she'd started leaving the room to take phone calls, her sudden interest in California wines and West Coast restaurants. And Michael, my sweet, trusting son, had explained it all away. He was proud of his wife's success, supportive of her career advancement. He'd even suggested they might consider relocating to Los Angeles if her company offered her a promotion. He had no idea his wife was already building a life there with another man. As I seasoned a pan of chicken thighs, comfort food that reminded me of Sunday dinners with Jerome, my phone rang. Jonathan from the Ritz-Carlton. "Mrs. Washington, I wanted to give you an update. A young woman just arrived asking about your suite reservation for tonight. She seemed surprised when I told her there was no reservation and that you'd requested to be notified of any inquiries." "What did she look like?" "African American, early 30s, very well dressed. Designer handbag, expensive jewelry. She seemed flustered when I explained the situation." Jasmine. She'd arrived at the hotel expecting to meet her lover, only to find that their usual arrangement had been disrupted. "Did she say anything else?" "She asked if there had been any mistake with the reservation system. When I assured her there hadn't been, she left quickly. She seemed quite upset." I thanked Jonathan and hung up. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing with a text from Jasmine. "Hey Eleanor, I'm going to be working super late tonight. Don't wait up for Michael. I might not be home until tomorrow morning. Big presentation prep." The lies were getting more elaborate by the hour. Instead of responding, I called my son. "Hey, Mom." Michael's voice was warm but tired. "How was tennis today?" "Michael, honey, I need you to come over. We need to talk." Something in my tone must have alarmed him. "Is everything okay? Are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine, baby. But there's something important I need to discuss with you. Can you come now?" "Of course. I'll be there in 20 minutes. As I waited for my son to arrive, I carefully arranged the evidence on my dining room table. The pregnancy test, the note, printouts of the social media photos, and the shipping information. Each piece told part of a story I wished I didn't have to share. But sometimes love means delivering the hardest truths, even when they shatter everything we hold dear. Michael arrived exactly 20 minutes later, as punctual as his father had always been. At 32, he was the image of Jerome in his younger years, tall, broad-shouldered, with intelligent dark eyes and a smile that could light up a room. Tonight, though, concern creased his features as he walked into the dining room. "Mom, what's all this?" He gestured at the items spread across the polished mahogany table. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what came next. Son, I need you to sit down. What I'm about to show you is going to be difficult to hear. As Michael lowered himself into the chair across from me, I began with the misdelivered package. I watched his face change as I explained each piece of evidence, saw the exact moment when understanding dawned in his eyes. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, he picked up the pregnancy test, turning it over in his hands as if he couldn't quite believe it was real. This can't be right. Jasmine and I have been trying to have a baby for over a year. She said the doctor told her she might have fertility issues. Another lie. Another carefully constructed deception designed to explain away the truth. Michael, honey, I'm so sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. He was quiet for a long time, studying the photos I'd printed. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Marcus was my best friend. I was going to ask him to be the godfather when we finally had kids. The pain in his voice broke my heart. This was my son, my only child, the center of my world since his father died. Seeing him discover that the two people he trusted most had betrayed him was almost unbearable. "What do I do now, Mom?" he asked, and for a moment he sounded like the little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees and broken toys. "Now we figure out what comes next," I said firmly. "But first, you deserve to hear the whole truth. And I think I know how we can get it." Because Eleanor Washington hadn't built a business empire by accepting half-truths and incomplete information. Over the next hour, we developed a plan. It wasn't about revenge. It was about getting the complete picture so Michael could make informed decisions about his future. We would give Jasmine enough rope to either explain herself honestly or hang herself with more lies. Michael would continue acting normally, not letting on that he knew anything. Meanwhile, I would use my resources to gather more information. If Jasmine was pregnant with another man's child while lying to her husband about her own fertility, there were legal implications that needed to be considered. "I should call Marcus," Michael said at one point. "Not yet," I counseled. "Let's see how Jasmine handles things first. If we confront them both simultaneously, they might coordinate their stories." As if summoned by our conversation, Michael's phone buzzed with a text from his wife. "Pulling an all-nighter at the office. Love you." More lies, delivered with emoji hearts. The next morning would bring revelations that none of us were prepared for. I spent that sleepless night in my home office, using every business connection and resource at my disposal to build a complete picture of Jasmine and Marcus's relationship. What I discovered was a pattern of deception that went back much further than any of us had realized. Credit card records showed charges in Los Angeles dating back 18 months. Expensive restaurants, luxury hotels, couples activities, all on cards that Jasmine had claimed were for business expenses. Flight records revealed a pattern of trips that corresponded exactly with Marcus's work schedule and vacation days. But the most damaging evidence came from a private investigator I'd hired for occasional background checks on potential business partners. For a substantial fee, he was able to access information that painted a clear picture of the affair's timeline. Jasmine and Marcus had been together since shortly after his move to California. The relationship had become serious enough that they'd been apartment hunting together just last month. Real estate records showed they'd put in offers on 3 different properties, all under both their names. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning a life together. Michael arrived early the next morning, looking haggard and exhausted. "She came home around 5 a.m., he reported. Claimed she'd slept at the office, but her clothes smelled like hotel soap. I shared what I'd discovered overnight. With each new piece of evidence, Michael's expression grew more resigned and resolved. "I need to confront her," he said finally. "I can't pretend anymore." "Are you sure you're ready?" He nodded, though I could see the pain still fresh in his eyes. "I deserve the truth. All of it." We agreed that he would approach Jasmine that evening, armed with the evidence we'd gathered. If she confessed and showed genuine remorse, perhaps there was a path forward. If she continued lying, well, we'd deal with that when it happened. What actually happened that evening would surprise us both. Michael called me around 8 p.m., his voice shaky but determined. "Mom, I need you to come over. Bring everything we found yesterday." I drove to their Brookhaven home, a beautiful craftsman-style house that Michael had bought as a surprise for Jasmine's birthday 2 years ago, with a folder full of evidence and a heart full of dread. I found them in their living room, sitting on opposite ends of the sectional sofa like strangers. Jasmine's face was streaked with tears, but there was something different in her expression. Relief, maybe, or resignation. "She told me everything," Michael said as I settled into the armchair across from them. "Not everything," Jasmine interjected quietly. "There's more." What she revealed next would change everything we thought we knew about the situation. "I never meant for any of this to happen," Jasmine began, her voice barely audible. "Marcus and I reconnected when I started traveling to LA for work. At first, it was just friendship. He was helping me navigate the city, showing me around. But then," she trailed off, unable to meet either of our eyes. "But then you fell in love with him?" Michael finished. "Yes," she whispered, "but it's more complicated than that." She took a shuddering breath before continuing. "I've been trying to find the courage to tell you for months, Michael. I know that doesn't excuse what I've done, but I've been miserable lying to you. You're a good man. You deserve so much better than what I've been giving you." "So you're pregnant with his child," I said, not as a question, but as a statement. Jasmine nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I found out last week. I was so scared I didn't know what to do. I ordered multiple pregnancy tests to be sure, and I guess one got sent to the wrong address." "To my address," I clarified. "I didn't even realize the mistake until Marcus called me yesterday, confused about why he hadn't received the package. When I tracked the shipping, I saw it had gone to you instead. I knew then that everything was about to come out. But there was still more to the story. The fertility issues," Michael said slowly. "Were those real, or was that another lie?" Jasmine's face crumpled. "They were real. But not in the way I let you believe." She took a deep breath. "I've been on birth control this entire time, Michael. I wasn't ready to have children with you. I kept making excuses, letting you think there was something wrong with my body, when really I was just scared and confused about what I wanted." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Not only had Jasmine been having an affair, but she'd been actively preventing pregnancy with her husband while getting pregnant with her lover. "So when you got pregnant with Marcus, it was intentional?" I asked. "Not exactly," she said quickly. "It was an accident. But when it happened, I realized that I wanted it. I wanted his child. I wanted a future with him." She looked at Michael with something like compassion in her eyes. "And I knew that meant I had to finally be honest with you." The conversation that followed was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. Instead of the anger and recriminations I'd expected, my son showed a maturity and grace that made me incredibly proud. He listened as Jasmine explained how their marriage had slowly deteriorated, how they'd grown apart without either of them really acknowledging it. He asked thoughtful questions about her feelings and her plans. He even asked about Marcus, whether he knew about the pregnancy, what his intentions were. "He knows," Jasmine confirmed. "He wants us to be together. He's offered to transfer back to Atlanta if that would make things easier for everyone." "Easier?" Michael let out a bitter laugh. "I'm not sure anything about this situation is going to be easy." But then he surprised both of us. "Jasmine, I need you to know something. I'm hurt. More hurt than I've ever been in my life, but I'm also relieved." She looked at him in confusion. "I've felt you pulling away for months," he continued. "I kept thinking it was work stress or marriage growing pains. I blame myself, wondering what I was doing wrong. In some ways, knowing the truth is better than wondering why my wife seemed like a stranger." It was then that I realized Michael had inherited more than just his father's looks. He'd inherited his wisdom and emotional intelligence as well. The divorce proceedings that followed were, by all accounts, remarkably civilized. Michael insisted on a collaborative approach rather than an adversarial one. Jasmine agreed to a fair settlement that didn't leave either party financially devastated. They sold the Brookhaven house and split the proceeds. Marcus did transfer back to Atlanta, though he and Michael never rebuilt their friendship. The betrayal there ran too deep, though Michael eventually reached a place of forgiveness, if not reconciliation. Jasmine and Marcus married 6 months after her divorce was finalized. Their daughter Maya was born healthy and beautiful. I met her once, accidentally, at a grocery store in Midtown when she was about 6 months old. And despite everything that had happened, I found myself hoping that the little girl would have a good life. As for Michael, he threw himself into work initially, channeling his pain into professional success. His architecture firm flourished, and he bought a beautiful loft in Virginia Highland, not far from my home. But more importantly, he seemed to rediscover himself during that difficult period. He started dating again after a year, taking his time and being more intentional about what he wanted in a partner. 2 years after his divorce, he met Sarah, a pediatric nurse at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. She was nothing like Jasmine. Quieter, more grounded, with a warm laugh and genuine kindness that immediately put everyone at ease. When Michael brought Sarah to Sunday dinner for the first time, I watched her help me in the kitchen without being asked, saw how naturally she interacted with my son, noticed the way her face lit up when she talked about her work with sick children. This was what love looked like when it was real and honest, so different from the performance Jasmine had been giving us for years. Michael and Sarah married 18 months later in a small ceremony at the Atlanta Botanical Garden. It was everything his first wedding hadn't been: intimate, authentic, filled with genuine joy, and surrounded by people who truly loved and supported them. Their twin boys, Jerome and James, were born 3 years later. As I held my grandsons for the first time, I marveled at how life has a way of working itself out in unexpected ways. That misdelivered package had indeed changed everything, but not in the way any of us had anticipated. It had shattered one version of our family, yes, but it had also paved the way for something more authentic and ultimately more beautiful. Sometimes, the most devastating mistakes really do lead to the most necessary truths. Now, at 61, I've learned to see that difficult period as a gift, strange as that might sound. It taught me that my son was stronger than I'd given him credit for. It showed me that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is deliver the hardest truths, even when it breaks your heart to do so. And it reminded me that families, real families, are built not just on love, but on honesty, respect, and the courage to face difficult realities together. Michael and Sarah live just 10 minutes away from me now, and I see my grandsons almost every day. We have Sunday dinners that are filled with laughter and chaos, and all the messy beauty of a family that's been tested and emerged stronger. As for that pregnancy test that started it all, I kept it, tucked away in my home office safe along with other important documents, not as a reminder of betrayal, but as a reminder of the moment when truth finally came to light. Because sometimes the packages that arrive at our doorstep really do contain revelations that change everything, and sometimes that's exactly what we need. The last time I saw Jasmine was at a charity fundraiser downtown about 6 months ago. She looked happy, genuinely happy in a way I'd never seen during her marriage to my son. Marcus was there too, attentive and clearly devoted to his family. We exchanged polite greetings, nothing more. But as I watched them together with their daughter, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not because I'd forgiven and forgotten. Some wounds leave permanent scars, but because I could see that everyone involved had found their way to where they belonged. Jasmine was with someone who could give her what she needed. Michael was building a life with someone who loved him completely and honestly, and sometimes that's the best possible outcome from the worst possible beginning. These days, when packages arrive at my door, I always check them carefully. But I'm no longer afraid of what I might find inside. After all, I've learned that the truth, no matter how painful, is always preferable to living a lie, and that sometimes the most unexpected revelations can lead to the most beautiful new chapters. The end of one story is often just the beginning of another, better one. Chapter 2. The Ripple Effects. But life has a way of continuing to surprise us, even when we think we've seen it all. 5 years had passed since that fateful afternoon when the misdelivered package changed everything. I thought our family's story of betrayal and redemption was complete. I was wrong. It was a humid Thursday evening in late July when my phone rang with news that would once again turn our world upside down. Michael was calling from the hospital, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Mom, you need to come to Northside Hospital right away. It's Sarah." My blood ran cold. Sarah was 7 months pregnant with their third child, a daughter they planned to name Eleanor after me. "What happened? Is the baby okay?" "She collapsed at work. They think it might be preeclampsia, but they're running more tests." "Mom, I'm scared." 20 minutes later, I was rushing through the hospital corridors, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. I found Michael in the maternity ward waiting room, still wearing his work clothes but looking disheveled and worried. His face brightened slightly when he saw me, and I pulled him into a fierce hug. "Any updates?" I asked. "They've stabilized her blood pressure for now, but the doctor wants to keep her for observation. If it gets worse, they might have to deliver the baby early." As we settled in for what could be a long wait, Michael's phone buzzed with a text message. His face went pale as he read it. "What is it, honey?" He showed me the screen. The message was from Marcus. "Heard about Sarah. Jasmine and I are praying for her. Let us know if you need anything." It was the first communication between the former best friends in over 5 years. "How did he even know?" Michael asked, more to himself than to me. The answer came in the form of Dr. Patricia Williams, Sarah's attending physician, who approached us with a clipboard and a gentle smile. Dr. Williams had been Sarah's doctor throughout her pregnancy, and I remembered her mentioning that she knew Jasmine professionally through some medical conference they'd both attended. "She must have mentioned it to Jasmine," I said quietly. "Medical community in Atlanta is smaller than you'd think." Michael stared at his phone for a long moment before typing back, "Thank you. We'll keep you posted." It was a small gesture, but something about it felt significant. Like a door that had been firmly closed was opening just a crack. Over the next several hours, as we waited for news about Sarah and the baby, that crack would widen into something none of us expected. Around midnight, Dr. Williams emerged from Sarah's room with cautiously optimistic news. "Her blood pressure is responding well to medication, and the baby's vitals are strong. We're going to keep her for a few more days to monitor the situation, but I think we caught it early enough to manage it conservatively." The relief was overwhelming. Michael practically collapsed into his chair, and I found myself crying tears I hadn't realized I'd been holding back. "Can I see her?" Michael asked. "Of course. She's been asking for both of you." Sarah looked tiny in the hospital bed, connected to various monitors, but her color was better, and her smile was genuine when she saw us. "Hi, beautiful," Michael said, kissing her forehead gently. "I'm sorry I scared you," she whispered. "Don't you dare apologize," I said firmly, taking her hand. You and that granddaughter of mine just focus on getting healthy. We stayed with her until visiting hours ended, and I convinced Michael to go home and get some rest. I'll stay the night, I offered. You need to be with the boys, and you need sleep. What I didn't expect was who else would show up during those quiet overnight hours. Around 3 a.m., I was dozing in the uncomfortable hospital chair when I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. I looked up to see a familiar figure in scrubs approaching Sarah's room, Jasmine. She stopped short when she saw me, clearly not expecting anyone to be there. Eleanor, she said softly, I was just checking on her. I heard what happened through Dr. Williams. I studied her face in the dim light filtering in from the hallway. She looked older, more mature than the woman who'd left my son 5 years ago. There were lines around her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult decisions, but also a kind of peace that had been missing during her marriage to Michael. She's stable, I said quietly, gesturing toward Sarah's sleeping form. They think they caught it early. Jasmine nodded, relief evident in her expression. That's good. Preeclampsia can be... She trailed off, realizing she was about to launch into medical details with someone who wasn't family anymore. You can sit, I said, surprising myself with the offer. If you want. What followed was the conversation I never thought we'd have. Jasmine settled into the chair next to mine, both of us watching Sarah's peaceful face as she slept. For several minutes, we sat in comfortable silence. How is Maya? I asked finally. A smile transformed Jasmine's face. She's wonderful, smart as a whip, just like her daddy. She's 5 now, starting kindergarten in the fall. She paused, then added quietly. She asks about Michael sometimes. She's seen pictures from when we were married. What do you tell her? The truth, in age-appropriate terms. That Michael was my first husband, and he's a good man who I hope she'll get to meet someday when she's older. I was surprised by this admission. You'd want that? Of course, Jasmine said, turning to look at me directly. Eleanor, I know I hurt your family terribly. I know I handled everything wrong, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But Michael is a good man. If Maya wants to know about that part of her history when she's old enough to understand, I won't stand in the way. There was something about the hospital setting, the late hour, and our shared concern for Sarah that made honesty feel both necessary and possible. I won't pretend what you did didn't devastate him, I said carefully, but I can see that you're happy now, really happy, in a way you never were with Michael. I am, she admitted, and I hope he is too. From what I hear, Sarah is perfect for him. She is. I paused, then decided to ask the question that had been nagging at me. Jasmine, can I ask you something? Looking back, do you think you and Michael ever really had a chance? Or were you just wrong for each other from the start? She considered this for a long moment. I think we loved the idea of each other more than we loved each other, if that makes sense. Michael wanted the successful, beautiful wife who would fit into his vision of the perfect life. I wanted the stable, dependable husband who would make my parents proud and give me security. But neither of you was really seeing the other person. Exactly. It wasn't until I met Marcus and felt what it was like to be truly known by someone that I realized what had been missing. She looked down at her hands. That doesn't excuse how I handled it. I should have been honest with Michael from the beginning, instead of lying and sneaking around. As dawn approached, our conversation took an unexpected turn. Eleanor, Jasmine said hesitantly, there's something else I should tell you. Something I've wanted to say for years but never had the opportunity. I waited, sensing this was important. When I was married to Michael, I always felt like I was auditioning for the role of daughter-in-law, like I had to prove I was worthy of being part of your family. It made me defensive sometimes, competitive in ways that weren't healthy. I was taken aback. I never meant to make you feel that way. I know you didn't. It wasn't really about you. It was about my own insecurities. But I want you to know that watching you with Sarah over the years, seeing how naturally and genuinely you've embraced her, has made me realize that the problem was never you. It was me. This admission hung in the air between us. I thought about those early years of Michael's first marriage, remembering moments when I'd sensed tension with Jasmine, but had attributed it to normal adjustment difficulties. You know, I said slowly, I always wondered why you seemed so guarded around me. I thought maybe I was too involved in Michael's life, too set in my ways to welcome someone new. Never, Jasmine said firmly. You were always gracious and welcoming. I was just too insecure to receive it properly. It was then that Sarah stirred, opening her eyes to find two women she'd never expected to see together. Jasmine, Sarah's voice was groggy but surprised. What are you doing here? I heard what happened and wanted to check on you, Jasmine explained. I hope that's okay. Sarah struggled to sit up slightly, and both Jasmine and I moved to help her. Of course it's okay. That's very kind of you. How are you feeling? Jasmine asked, slipping into her professional demeanor. Better. Tired, but better. Sarah looked between us curiously. This is unexpected. I found myself smiling. Life is full of surprises. Speaking of surprises, Sarah said, the baby has been incredibly active tonight. I think all the excitement has her stirred up. She placed her hands on her belly, and we could see small movements beneath her hospital gown. May I? Jasmine asked, gesturing toward Sarah's stomach. Sarah nodded, and Jasmine gently placed her hand on the spot where the baby was moving. Her face lit up with wonder and something like nostalgia. She's strong, Jasmine said softly, and positioned well. I think she's going to be just fine. Watching this moment, my son's current wife and his ex-wife bonding over the baby he was about to welcome, I realized that healing sometimes comes in forms we never could have imagined. Just then, Michael appeared in the doorway, obviously having come straight from home. He stopped short when he saw Jasmine, his expression cycling through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been gratitude. Jasmine, thank you for coming. Of course, she said, standing up from her chair. I should go. I just wanted to make sure Sarah was okay. But Sarah reached out and caught her hand. Stay for a minute. I'd like to talk to you both. Michael looked uncertain, but he came into the room and took his usual position on Sarah's other side. I know this situation is complicated, Sarah began, but I want to say something. Jasmine, what you did 5 years ago hurt Michael deeply. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But it also led him to me, and to our children, and to the life we have now. She looked at Michael, then at Jasmine. I don't believe in holding grudges against people who've found their way to where they belong, and I can see that you have. What Sarah said next would surprise all of us. When this baby is born, when Eleanor gets to meet her namesake, I want it to be a celebration of family in all its forms, and that includes acknowledging the paths that brought us here, even the difficult ones. She squeezed both Michael's hand and Jasmine's. I'm not saying we all need to be best friends, but maybe we can be something better than strangers who share a past. Michael was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Finally, he looked at Jasmine. How is Maya? Jasmine's face brightened. She's wonderful. She's starting kindergarten in the fall, and she's obsessed with dinosaurs. Dinosaurs? Michael smiled slightly. She sounds like Jerome. He went through a dinosaur phase that lasted about 2 years. I remember, Jasmine said softly. You used to read him those paleontology books. And just like that, the ice that had formed 5 years ago began to thaw. Over the next hour, as dawn broke over Atlanta, The four of us talked in a way that would have seemed impossible just days before. Michael showed Jasmine pictures of the twins, and she shared stories about Maya. Sarah asked about Marcus, genuinely interested in hearing that he was doing well in his career and as a father. It wasn't comfortable. There were awkward pauses and careful word choices, but it was real, and it was healing in ways that none of us had expected. When visiting hours officially began and other family members started arriving, Jasmine prepared to leave. "Michael," she said hesitantly as she gathered her purse, "Marcus wanted me to tell you, if you ever want to talk, he's open to it. No pressure, no expectations. But if you ever want to clear the air, he's here." Michael nodded slowly. "Maybe someday. Not yet, but maybe someday." After Jasmine left, Sarah looked at Michael with eyes full of love and understanding. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I think so," he said, sounding surprised by his own answer. It was strange, but good strange, like closing a chapter that I didn't realize was still open. "I'm proud of you," I told my son. "Both of you," I added, looking at Sarah. "For what?" Sarah asked. "For being bigger than your hurt? For choosing healing over resentment?" Little did we know that this moment of reconciliation was preparing us for challenges that lay ahead. Sarah and baby Eleanor came home 3 days later, healthy and strong. The delivery was smooth, and our newest family member was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and her grandfather Jerome's distinctive chin. Michael was besotted from the moment he held her. "She looks just like you, Mom," he said, tears in his eyes as he placed his daughter in my arms for the first time. "She looks like herself," I corrected, but I was touched by the resemblance and the honor of having her named after me. The twins, now 4 years old, were fascinated by their baby sister. Jerome was protective and gentle, constantly wanting to help with feeding and diaper changes. James was more mischievous, trying to share his toys with a baby who was far too young for them. It should have been a perfect time for our family, but life had other plans. 2 weeks after baby Eleanor was born, I received a phone call that would test everything we thought we'd learned about forgiveness and family. It was Marcus. "Mrs. Washington." His voice was formal, nervous. "I hope I'm not overstepping by calling you directly. I got your number from Jasmine." "What can I do for you, Marcus?" I asked, curious despite myself. "It's about my father. He's dying. Cancer. And he's asked to see Michael before it's too late." I was stunned. Marcus's father, Dr. Robert Chen, had been like a second father to Michael during college. A distinguished professor of economics at Emory University, he'd mentored Michael through some difficult academic and personal challenges during his early 20s. "Dr. Chen is sick?" I asked, my heart sinking. "Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He has maybe 2 weeks, according to his doctors." Marcus's voice broke slightly. "Mrs. Washington, I know I have no right to ask anything of your family. I know what I did was unforgivable, but my father, he's been asking about Michael for months. He doesn't know about what happened between us. He just knows that Michael stopped visiting, stopped calling, and he blames himself somehow." The weight of this request settled over me like a heavy blanket. "Marcus, this is a lot to ask." "I know, and if Michael says no, I'll understand." But I had to try. My father was always so proud of Michael, talked about him like he was his own son. It would mean everything to him to see Michael one more time. I closed my eyes, thinking about the kind, brilliant man who had been such a positive influence on my son's life. Dr. Chen had attended Michael's college graduation, had been at his first wedding, had sent thoughtful gifts when the twins were born. "Let me talk to Michael," I said finally. "I'll call you back." The conversation with Michael was as difficult as I'd expected. He wants me to visit his father? Michael's voice was incredulous. The man who was like a father to me, and he never even told him what really happened? Maybe he was protecting him, I suggested. Dr. Chen has been battling cancer. Maybe Marcus didn't want to burden him with family drama. Michael paced around his living room, baby Eleanor sleeping peacefully in her bassinet nearby. Sarah was feeding the twins dinner in the kitchen, giving us privacy to talk. Mom, I don't know if I can do this. Seeing Marcus, pretending everything is fine. You wouldn't have to pretend anything, I said. You'd be there for Dr. Chen, not for Marcus. But the decision wasn't just Michael's to make. Sarah appeared in the doorway, having obviously overheard part of our conversation. What's going on? Michael explained the situation, and I watched Sarah's face as she processed the complexity of the request. You have to go, she said simply. What? Michael looked at her in surprise. You have to go see him, Michael. Dr. Chen was important to you. He's dying, and he wants to see you. Everything else is secondary to that. But Marcus will be there, yes, and it will be uncomfortable. But you're not going for Marcus. You're going for a man who helped shape who you became. A man who deserves to have his final wishes honored. Sarah's wisdom often amazed me, but never more than in that moment. Besides, she continued, our daughter is named Eleanor because family legacy matters. Dr. Chen is part of your legacy, part of what made you the man I fell in love with. Don't let Marcus's betrayal steal that from you. Michael looked at me, then at Sarah, then at his sleeping daughter. You're both right, he said finally. I need to call Marcus back. The visit was arranged for the next day at Dr. Chen's home in Druid Hills. I offered to drive Michael, and he accepted gratefully. The ride was quiet. Both of us lost in memories of better times when our families had been close. Dr. Chen's house was a stately Tudor-style home surrounded by mature oak trees. Marcus answered the door, looking older and more careworn than I remembered. Michael, he said quietly. Thank you for coming. Michael nodded but didn't speak. The tension between them was palpable. Marcus led us to the sunroom, where Dr. Chen was resting in a hospital bed that had been set up to catch the morning light. He was thin and frail, but his eyes lit up when he saw Michael. My boy, he said weakly, reaching out his hand. I've missed you. What followed was one of the most emotionally charged hours of my life. Michael sat beside Dr. Chen's bed, holding the older man's hand while they talked about everything and nothing. Dr. Chen wanted to hear about the twins, about Sarah, about Michael's work. He shared memories from Michael's college years, stories I'd never heard about late-night study sessions and weekend fishing trips. Marcus and I stood in the background, both of us crying quietly as we watched the reunion between these two men who had meant so much to each other. I'm sorry I haven't been around more, Michael said at one point. Nonsense, Dr. Chen replied. You're a busy man with a family to raise. I understand. I just wanted to see you one more time to tell you how proud I am of the man you've become. It was then that Dr. Chen said something that changed everything. Michael, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Michael leaned closer. Of course, Dr. Chen. Marcus has been different these past few years. Distant, sad. And he won't tell me why you two aren't close anymore. I know something happened between you, and I'm afraid it might be because of something I did or said. Michael's eyes filled with tears. Dr. Chen, no, you didn't do anything wrong. You've been nothing but kind and supportive to me. Then what happened? Why does my son look at me with such guilt in his eyes? Why do you both seem to be carrying some terrible burden? The moment of truth had arrived, and Michael had to decide how much of the story to tell a dying man. Michael looked at Marcus, who nodded almost imperceptibly, giving permission for the truth to be told. Dr. Chen, Michael began slowly, Marcus and my ex-wife, they fell in love. They're married now, and they have a daughter together. Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. And you blame Marcus for this? I did. For a long time. And do you still? Michael considered the question carefully. I'm working on forgiveness. It's complicated. Dr. Chen turned his gaze to his son, who was standing frozen in the corner. Marcus, come here. What happened next was a master class in wisdom and grace. Marcus approached his father's bedside reluctantly. Dr. Chen reached out and took both Michael's and Marcus's hands, placing them together in his own weakened grip. Listen to me, both of you, he said with more strength than he'd shown all morning. Love is not a choice. It's a force of nature. It strikes where it will, when it will, and we can no more control it than we can control the weather. He looked at Marcus. Son, you made mistakes in how you handled your feelings. Betraying a friend is never acceptable, no matter what your heart tells you. Then he turned to Michael. And you, my boy, you have every right to your anger and your hurt. But holding on to it will only poison your own happiness. His next words would stay with both men for the rest of their lives. I am dying, Dr. Chen said simply. And in my final days, I don't want to think about my son and the young man I love like a son being enemies because of circumstances that are already in the past. Life is too short, and family, chosen family, is too precious. He squeezed their hands together. I'm not asking you to be best friends again. I'm not asking you to pretend nothing happened, but I am asking you to release each other from the burden of hatred. For my sake, if not for your own. Both Michael and Marcus were crying openly now. Marcus, Dr. Chen continued, you will apologize to Michael one more time, and you will mean it with every fiber of your being. Marcus looked directly at Michael for the first time in years. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I'm sorry for betraying your trust, for lying to you, for causing you pain. I'm sorry for choosing the coward's way instead of being honest from the beginning. You deserved so much better from me. And Michael, Dr. Chen said, you will accept his apology and release him from this debt. Not because he deserves it, but because you deserve to be free from carrying this anger. It was a moment that redefined what forgiveness could look like. Michael was quiet for a long time, struggling with emotions that had been 5 years in the making. Finally, he spoke. I accept your apology, Marcus, and I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, but because Dr. Chen is right. I don't want to carry this anymore. The two men didn't embrace. They didn't suddenly become friends again. But something fundamental shifted in that sunroom. Something that allowed healing to begin. Dr. Chen smiled peacefully. Good. Now, Marcus, I want to hear about my granddaughter. And Michael, I want to hear about these twins of yours. Let's talk about the future instead of the past. We spent 2 more hours in that house, and by the time we left, something had been restored that we hadn't even realized was broken. Dr. Chen passed away 3 days later, peacefully in his sleep. Michael attended the funeral, sitting with Sarah and the children in the back of the church. Marcus saw them there and nodded his acknowledgement, but they didn't speak. It was enough. The months that followed brought a different kind of peace to our family. Michael seemed lighter somehow, as if releasing that old anger had freed up space for more joy. Sarah noticed it first, the way he laughed more freely with the children, the way he seemed more present in their daily life. Baby Eleanor thrived, growing into a happy, alert infant who seemed to smile at everyone she met. The twins adored her, and our family dinners became even more chaotic and wonderful with 3 children around the table. As for me, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought us to this place. That misdelivered package 5 years ago had seemed like a catastrophe at the time, but it had led us to exactly where we needed to be. And then, just when life seemed to have settled into a new normal, another surprise arrived. It was a Saturday morning in early spring when the doorbell rang. I was in my kitchen, preparing ingredients for Sunday dinner, when I opened the door to find a young girl standing on my doorstep. She was maybe 6 years old, with Marcus's intelligent dark eyes and Jasmine's delicate features. She was holding a small bouquet of flowers and looking nervous, but determined. "Are you Eleanor?" she asked in a clear, sweet voice. "I am," I said, kneeling down to her level. "And you must be Maya." She nodded solemnly. "Mama said you were Michael's mom, and that Michael used to be married to her before she married my daddy." "That's right, sweetheart. Mama also said you were probably very sad when she left Michael, and that maybe we should say sorry." I looked up to see Jasmine standing at the end of my driveway, clearly having given her daughter the courage to make this gesture on her own. "These are for you," Maya said, holding out the flowers. "I picked them myself from our garden." I accepted the bouquet, genuinely touched by the gesture. "They're beautiful, Maya. Thank you. Mama says you have grandsons who are my age. Do you think they might want to be friends someday?" The innocence of the question, the hope in her voice, made my heart ache in the best possible way. "I think that would be wonderful," I said honestly. "But that's something the grown-ups will have to talk about." Maya nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Mama says grown-ups have to fix things first before kids can play together." Out of the mouths of babes. I walked Maya back to where Jasmine was waiting, the little girl skipping alongside me. "I hope this wasn't too presumptuous," Jasmine said nervously. "She's been asking questions about her family history, and when she learned about Michael and your grandsons—" "It wasn't presumptuous at all," I assured her. "It was sweet." We stood there for a moment, watching Maya examine my flower garden with the intense curiosity of a 6-year-old. "Jasmine," I said quietly, "would you like to come to Sunday dinner tomorrow? You and Marcus and Maya?" Her eyes widened in surprise. "Are you sure?" "Michael might need some warning," I admitted. "But yes, I'm sure. It's time." The next evening, our dining room hosted the most unusual family dinner in our history. Michael and Sarah arrived with the children as usual, but their expressions were cautious when they saw Marcus's car in the driveway. "You sure about this, Mom?" Michael asked as we gathered in the living room. "No," I said honestly, "but I think it's right." The evening was awkward at first, with too polite conversation and careful topic selection, but children have a way of breaking down barriers that adults spend years constructing. Jerome and James were initially shy around Maya, but when she produced a collection of toy dinosaurs from her backpack, all social hesitation disappeared. Soon the three of them were on the floor, creating elaborate prehistoric adventures while the adults watched with amazement. "She really does love dinosaurs," Michael observed, smiling as Maya explained the difference between a Triceratops and a Stegosaurus to his sons. "She gets it from Marcus," Jasmine said. "He has a whole collection of paleontology books that she's obsessed with." And slowly, conversation began to flow more naturally. Marcus and Michael found themselves discussing their work. Marcus had been promoted to a senior position at Goldman Sachs, while Michael's architecture firm was expanding into sustainable building design. They discovered they shared concerns about environmental impacts and urban planning challenges. Sarah and Jasmine talked about the challenges of working motherhood, finding common ground in their struggles to balance career ambitions with family responsibilities. As for me, I watched my grandson show Maya how to hold baby Eleanor properly, and I felt something shift in my understanding of what family could mean. By the end of the evening, we hadn't magically become one big happy family, but we had become something new, something more complex and honest than what we'd been before. As they prepared to leave, Maya ran to Michael and threw her arms around his legs. "Thank you for letting me play with your sons," she said solemnly. "Jerome says maybe next time we can build a fort." Michael's voice was thick with emotion as he replied, "I'd like that very much, Maya." Marcus approached more hesitantly. "Michael, thank you for this? For giving us a chance. Thank you for raising a daughter who reminds me that some things are more important than old hurts," Michael replied. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a beginning. Over the following months, these dinners became a monthly tradition. The children looked forward to them eagerly, and gradually, the adults did too. Maya became a bridge between our families, her innocent questions and observations helping all of us see situations from new perspectives. "Why did you and Mama get divorced?" she asked Michael one evening with the directness that only children possess. "Because sometimes people love each other but aren't right for each other," Michael explained carefully. "Your mama needed to be with your daddy to be truly happy. And you needed to be with Sarah?" "Exactly." Maya considered this seriously. "So everybody ended up where they belonged?" "Yes, sweetheart. Everybody ended up where they belonged." And as I listened to this exchange, I realized that Maya had just articulated the truth that had taken the rest of us years to understand. Now, as I write this story 7 years after that first misdelivered package, I'm preparing for baby Eleanor's first birthday party. The guest list includes not only our immediate family but also Marcus, Jasmine, and Maya, because somewhere along the way, we've learned that family isn't always defined by blood or law, but sometimes by the courage to forgive and the wisdom to embrace complexity. Michael and Marcus will never be best friends again. Too much has happened for that. But they've found a way to be something different. 2 men who share a history, who've hurt each other deeply, and who've chosen to build something new from the wreckage of what was lost. Sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones that have been broken and rebuilt with stronger materials. The pregnancy test that started this whole journey sits in my safe, a reminder not of betrayal, but of the moment when truth finally came to light. And truth, as difficult as it can be to face, really did set us all free. Maya calls me Grandma Eleanor now, and Jerome and James consider her their honorary sister. Baby Eleanor will grow up knowing that families come in all shapes and sizes, and that love, real love, is always worth the complicated work of forgiveness. Because sometimes the packages that arrive at our doorstep really do contain exactly what we need, even when we're sure they'll destroy us. And sometimes, just sometimes, the most unexpected revelations lead not just to new chapters, but to entirely new and better stories than anything we could have written ourselves. The end.